Is America denying men the right to stare at women's nipples? Okay, so this is going to be an article about a woman that was playing frisbee topless in her yard in Colorado. She got fined and then she sued back, got a big settlement. But the article and the discussion is going to be about women's chest and women going around topless and things like that. So adult mentality required. But one thing I am thinking about here, it's important about the words that are said, how I say it. If I said it in the start like that, men staring at women's chest versus what it is where it's women wanting to be topless and wanting to be okay to be without a shirt in public or in private, and however, it changes it. If you change the term where it's like, oh, I'm going to show you my testicles, you're like, oh, no, that's a sexual thing. It has a certain term, certain connotation. How about, hey, that woman's going to show you her chesticles. Do we look at the woman's chest as chesticles, whereas we look at the men's chest as just a chest? So this article, as I mentioned, this is about one thing I'm going to try to keep in mind is they literally mean figuratively. Some of these things, like the title of this is Does the US Have a Problem with Topless Women? By Doti Shah of BBC News Colorado. Yes, I'm sure somebody has a problem, but even just from the title, does the US? Who in the US? The woman is in the US. She is topless. She's comfortable being topless. So she obviously doesn't have a problem with her being topless. But when they put things like this, does the US, who do they mean by the US in this situation? What do they literally mean by the US? So it must be figuratively in this thing. And then topless women. Which topless women? Where? How are they doing? Is just topless women at all? Do we want women to be like how people were back in the church where nuns were bathing in clothes? And you'd ask them, why are you bathing in this clothes? Why are you bathing me on this tarp? And no one is in there, but he's like, oh, but God can't see me. And they kind of think like, okay, God can actually see through that. He's omniscient, right? But they don't go to that point. So I know there are some aspects, and some people will have some situations in some certain situations they'll want that. So that's one thing I'm going to try to keep in mind as I read this. And let's get into it. So, does the US have a problem with topless women? And it opens up with two topless women in a protest. This is from the back. There's other people walking around topless. I think there's men out there, so it's a mixed kind of thing. I see somebody with some angel wings there. One of the women on the right says, "My body's not obscene," and the other one says, "Nudity does not equal sex." Yes, nudity does not equal sex. Your body is not obscene, but your body is also not something that has to be seen by everyone. My body's not obscene. Your body doesn't have to be seen. That's also the kind of thing that I'm saying right there. It's like, yeah, it's not obscene, but I also don't have to see it. Nudity does not equal sex. Yes, sure, I agree. But you have some situations right now in the Me Too era. There are some situations specifically. I want to think of the Louis C.K. situation where he actually exposed himself to women. He'd ask them, "Can I expose myself to you?" And they'd say, "Okay." Then he would. And in some cases, he would go on to masturbating. But I think in all situations that I've heard of, could be wrong, he asks them to do it. So in that situation, if you just run in and you expose yourself as a man to women, that may be considered obscene. That may be considered sexual assault. But they want to go with this situation. Nudity does not equal sex. So what is it in this situation? I don't really expect any kind of consistency in this thing. I try to be consistent. I fail a lot. Other people fail a lot. People do this. It's understood. Let's get into the reading. I'm going to try to read at least a paragraph before I give comments. But let's go. And I'm going to be explaining the images. And as I said, there's going to be links below. I didn't say that before, but there's going to be a link below to this. You can follow me as I read it. Okay. So women are fed up. Women fed up with being forced to cover up their breasts and nipples are challenging American laws about nudity and sparking a debate about the country's attitude to the naked female form. In September, Effie Crocos was awarded a $50,000, which is a 38,178 pound civil settlement after she took off her shirt in public in Loveland, Colorado, and was issued a summons for doing so. The 20-year-old was charged with indecent exposure after she played frisbee topless in her fiance's front yard. That's good. I mean, some people are like, yeah, at least there's some people who might not be so much for her being topless, but those same people will probably be happy to hear a 20-year-old is getting married. It's kind of going against. Well, I think still majority of people do get married in their early 20s, but there is a wider range of people getting married much later. Okay, back to the reading. She had thought that the law in Colorado had changed and she was safe to take her shirt off when she got hot and sweaty during the game. After all, her fiancé had removed his top too. they were equal, right? I have this saying: everything that's good for the goose is not good for the gander. Otherwise, we'd all be geese. There are differences here. As I mentioned before, if I guess they're saying the top's the difference, so they're saying chest. Well, anyway, here we go. So I thought it was fine because there had been a ruling by the Tenth Circuit Court of Appeals which covers Colorado. I'd read an article about it saying that it was okay for women to go topless. It was a warm September day and the weather was roasting. I took my shirt off without thinking too much about it. Unquote. So I don't know. I guess it's different folks, different strokes. But maybe because I've had issues with my weight, I have issues just taking my top off. I would just like take my shirt off and be out and just expose myself in that sense. But if she's comfortable enough, there's a picture here of Effie Koffo. She's doing one of those selfie type of things, slanted image thing. Got the finger on her. Yeah, you can check out in the link. She's kind of got a smirk on her face here. And yeah, so she's I think she feels herself. She's passably attractive, I guess. I'm not going to go and give some kind of rating for her, but she's not ugly and she's comfortable with herself, as we can see here. So good for you, Effie. Back to the reading now. But a few hours later, a police officer turned up to tell her that there had been complaints and she was facing charges. Crocus told the BBC, I kept asking the police officer what I was being charged with, but I was told I was disgusting the neighbors and there were children around, and what made it okay for me to think I could be topless? I was taken aback because for everyone to be here today who was breastfed, you would have had a topless woman feed you. What is so disgusting about that? Okay, so purpose, what you're doing, depending on what you're doing in the situation. If you're a model, a nude model in a situation, in a room, and people are drawing you, that is different than just walking into a movie theater where people are watching a movie naked. There's context in some of these things. Like, you can't equate the two. And most of the situations, if she had said, okay, people breastfeed in public, so why can't I be like this in public? That's understandable. But even this whole topless woman feed you thing, there's those covers. Some women have those little cover things for breastfeeding. People wear certain tops. You can do it. You can go to a certain private place. I know there are some places where women just breastfeed in public and things like that. So maybe that's how it is in Colorado, and people are just open feeding everywhere. But even if you're not open feeding, you're feeding a child. It is a process. You're feeding a child in that situation. Your breast is being used as a different purpose there versus it just being out there. I think to equate the two is not necessarily the same. But it is still the flesh, so if somebody doesn't have a problem with one, what's the problem with the other? One is jumping up and down, moving in a different situation. There's different kind of situations, there's context for these things. That's why people don't just walk around nude all the time. Back to the reading. Life-changing effects. Crocus said by the time the officer arrived at her home, she was fully clothed, while her fiancé remained topless, and yet there had been no complaints about him. It's not like I was standing in the middle of the road screaming, "Look at me." I was discreetly playing frisbee in my yard when I had my top off, she added. But it didn't matter. She had to get lawyers involved to have the charges dismissed and the case sealed so it would not come up in background checks. If the charge of indecent exposure had been upheld, it would have derailed her dream of teaching. There was a risk at one point that I would have been marked down as a sexual predator, as indecent exposure is a sexual offense, Crocus said. Now, this is the thing. I would like to understand what she has the things. They're talking about the tops. They're talking about tops. So maybe they're saying, okay, it's equal. Nipples and nipples. And there's something that comes with humanity. Like, why do men have nipples to begin with? Like, there's no actual purpose of them. It's just that I think we all start as pretty much non-gender in the womb, and then it comes to a point where it's like you switch one to the other and different things. The testes fall out or they go in. So there's all these kind of genetic, biological, amazing things that happen in this. But when you come out, there is a difference between men and women. We are a sexually dimorphic species. We are going to be treated in the same way. And even as she said, she was talking about, it's not like I was standing in the middle of the road screaming, "Look at me." So if she thinks there's no issue with just being seen by other people in public, topless, then why should it matter if she's standing in the middle of the road yelling, "Yell at me," or in her front yard? I guess you could say public versus private property and things like that. But let's say she was on her front yard yelling, "Look at me." Would that be bad in her opinion? I don't know. Back to the reading. Free the nipple. Crocus had thought she would be safe because of a court ruling made earlier in the year. Britt Hoagland and Samantha Six, activists with the Free the Nipple, a global movement that campaigns for gender equality in nudity, sued the city of Fort Collins, Colorado for females to have the right to be topless in the same way men can be. In Fort Collins, females aged 10 and older were not allowed to knowingly appear in any public place with their breasts exposed. This also included private places where there was a chance of somebody at ground level seeing them from a public spot. There were some exemptions such as breastfeeding, but Hoagland said the city's council stance, quote, criminalized and sexualized minors over 10 years old, unquote, and she wanted to take a stand. Here's a picture of Britt Hoagland, which is sued the city of Fort Collins. She's got a rainbow flag in the back with the brown added on it, which I don't know what the brown and the black is added there. There's another flag that has a purple stripe, a white stripe, a gray stripe, and a black stripe. I don't know what that one is. I would not be surprised if she was one of those like bigender or multi-gender people. I don't know what she identifies as, but she has that odd. It's just that look on her face where I don't know what look this is. It's startled, happy, startled. It's like excited but startled at the same time. Startled. Stark-sighted. I don't know. There's some word for that look. I think you guys would understand if you saw the look. You can check it out in the article. As I said, it's going to be here below. Okay, so back to the reading. And as I mentioned, the issue was breastfeeding did have a separate situation because they're talking about it's actually in a certain use. It's in a certain way that it doesn't really count as just being naked. And there is something here that I do agree, because I do see this in Kenya, in some places. You don't see it that much in the United States of America, but it depends on where. Maybe in Minnesota, there's some places, this might be happening. Minneapolis, because there's a lot of Somalis and Muslims who actually wear the full hijab and that kind of garb. But you see that here where you have kids. I see girls who are 10 and below and things like, looks like 5-year-olds and things like that, wearing hijab. And then I'm just like, okay, I guess it's a fashion, but part of the hijab thing is we're not supposed to sexualize females. Men are not supposed to look at females in that sense. So I kind of look at this situation and I'm like, if you have a girl who's 5 doing that way, are you saying that this girl needs to be covered up because she's a sexual being? And that is a creepy thing for me to kind of go in and think the mentality that goes behind some of these things. Or is it just habit? Is it just like, oh, she just wears the outfit because it's traditional and we're getting her used to it? Or maybe her mom wears it and she wants to be like mom, so she's wearing something and we're kind of just teaching and indoctrinating this culture into her. Because if Miss Hoagland here, I don't want to say miss, if Britt Hoagland here was saying that, okay, that is criminalized and sexualizing minors over 10, would she say the same thing about Muslims who have their daughters who are younger wear hijab, cover up? If they're telling girls over 10 they need to be covered because it's sexual, then if you tell girls younger than 10 they have to be covered in full hijab, would she go up to a Muslim and say, you're sexualizing that girl and that's messed up? She needs to be able to walk around topless even. Not even just not in the hijab, but topless. Would she go out and say that? I doubt it. Okay, back to the reading. Backed by lawyers as well as supporters of the Free the Nipple campaign, the pair saw success in February when the city's ban was ruled unconstitutional by the federal 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. Judge Gregory Phillips wrote in the ruling, quote, "We're left, as the district court was, to suspect that the city's professed interest in protecting children derives not from any morphological differences between men's and women's breasts, but from negative stereotypes depicting women's breasts, but not men's breasts, as sex objects." Unquote. Okay, Judge Gregory Phillips. This is not negative stereotype. It literally is. A woman's breast is a sexual thing. Just think about it this way. If there's a woman standing there and you're just talking to a woman and then you put your hand up on her chest. You're just having a conversation, you're like, hey, okay, listen to me, like, okay, I'm sorry this happened to you, you want to listen to me? And you put your hand on her chest and continue talking. That is a different thing than talking to a guy and putting your hand on his chest and continuing to talk. If a girl was, if let's say a woman was doing it the other way, even if it's both women, there is a difference. The female breast is sexual. The male breast is not. This is a simple thing. I don't know why we have to have this conversation. For some people, maybe it's not. Like you look at the people in those tribes that are not really integrated with developed countries and things like that, these tribes out there where people just walk around topless, they might not have so much sexualization with the breasts. And maybe if you go to a nudist colony, people don't have sexualization with the actual privates. It is a thing where it's cultural, but there is something sexual about a woman's breast that does not exist about a male's breast. I think this is a common thing. Most women, majority of women in the West, will take somebody grasping their chest in a different way than majority of men would. The majority of men would treat a man grabbing a woman's breast a different way. Is that a negative thing? I don't know. I don't think it is. It's just the way things are right now. Things could change, but hey. Okay, back to the reading. This court's jurisdiction includes Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. Therefore, many eyes are on these states and local governments to see how they deal with women choosing to go topless following the ruling. In September, after spending $322,000 or £244,964, Fort Collins eventually decided to give up its fight to keep battling the lawsuit and rewrote its local laws to reflect the court's judgment. That's a lot of money, and that's all I think it's taxpayer money here, like people that has been taken from taxes. So that's a lot of money. Some of these things were kind of like, you see, I don't know. What's that money spent? And will that money be recouped in any way? I guess it goes back into the lawyers and things like that. Some of those lawyers might be private in sector, and then that money gets taxed back from those private sectors, or it might be tax-free. I don't know what happens in these situations. That seems like a lot of money to kind of defend this and then kind of bail out on it. But, okay. So the local paper, the Coloradoan, reported that the issue remained controversial, with some wishing to continue the fight, stating that the original ban on public nudity had reflected the values of the community. Okay, so this is the thing. If you have this situation where you break down communities, where people have more autonomy into what they do, they can choose who they deal with and choose who they don't want to deal with. You don't have these laws that are overreaching and far-reaching and things like that. Then you have situations where if there wants to be, for example, a Muslim community and they want to dress in a certain way, and they feel when we're here, this is what we dress like, and that's how we kind of do it, let them do it in that area. As long as they're not forcing other people to... It's their private area. If you go there, they say you have to dress this way, you dress that way, but then you also have your private area, and if you say you can't come in here completely covered, we only see your eyes, we want to see people's faces, then those people are allowed to do it. Then let's see how these communities kind of live. Which kind of society lives in a better way? But these overreaching laws, I don't really support them. So I am for people being able to say, we don't want women to dress like this in this area. And there are going to be some women who also don't want to be that way in that area. And then they can go and congregate with these people and live with them that way. And then there could be other places where the women are allowed to dress however they want, be naked the whole time. And that's how it is. Like, let's do this colonies. Let's have topless colonies in areas. Let's have no topless colonies. Let people live in a certain way. That's what I'm not completely against. Okay, back to the reading. Changing words. Fort Collins Mayor Kristen Stevens was among those who voted to remove the wording from the city code after the federal court's ruling. She told the BBC, "I can't speak for everyone, but I chose not to proceed because I felt a protracted legal battle was not in the best interests of the city," unquote. While Fort Collins chose to amend the wording of its law, other cities and states have not necessarily done so. In Crocus's case, Loveland's local laws do not allow exposure in public places, but the city agreed to the payout following advice from its insurers after the law firm representing Hoagland and Six got involved. So yeah, this is a situation where they're like, okay, these guys have big money, there's a lot of money behind this. And this is the thing. People have resources and they have access to different levels of defense in this situation. The system is still there. You could technically still get this defense on your own, but you'd have to leave your job. There's certain people who have reasons for going in here and backing certain things. And they also have the precedent. Now that they've seen the precedent, the next time it comes down the line, people feel there's some kind of reason for me to actually invest in this one because the next case comes up, people are going to look back to this case and say, hey, those people have already done it, so we're not even going to bother with this situation. So I do understand that whole idea of putting in towards these things. Some people are against this, but there are some things. There's probably things that you like in your life, that you consider in your life positive, that were involved with somebody bringing some big money behind some case that now you can do it. For drug legalization, there are certain cases where somebody puts a lot of money between somebody's case and then gets drugs legalized in that situation, or overturns some kind of case somebody had for possession of some kind of drug, and then it has a knock-on effect for everybody else. So I kind of see that people are like, oh, there's a knock-on effect here. But still, even if it was completely illegal for everybody walking around topless, do you think tomorrow people will just start walking around topless? How many people are actually comfortable enough with doing that? Okay, and again, if you have it on private land, I don't think it's too big of an issue. Back to the reading. And the Oklahoma City Police Department, for example, has said that it will continue to enforce the local laws banning women from appearing topless in public, with the city's Attorney General, Mike Hunter, stating, quote, "These courts have recognized that states and political subdivisions have a legitimate interest in prohibiting public nudity as traditionally defined," unquote. There have been places where it is legal for women to be topless. In Philadelphia, women can be naked but not lewd. Lewd. That word, lewd. Lewd is such a lewd word. It's like moist. Moist is such a moist word, and they're both lewd. Both lewd words. While in New York City, female toplessness is allowed. The website Go Topless reports that there are many states with ambiguous laws regarding what's allowed and what isn't. Okay, this website Go Topless, I think we're seeing apps and things like this. There's this really cool, it's being made into a TV show, so more people get to find out about it now. But it's called Snow Crash. It's this sci-fi book, and it's about there's this thing in cities, and it's also the idea that I thought of having with when I was creating the general world of Carbon, which is a story that I have, where these kind of cities and these smaller places, and they talk about this above here, political subdivisions have a legitimate interest. So political subdivisions are smaller than states. It's smaller than areas. So they have this kind of thing where these cities have these different rules and laws where you can enter the city and it has its own rules and laws and its own organization. But the outside land is connected by these public land, this open kind of wild lands with these big highways that everybody's invested in that are organized by some other government where you can kind of, no man's land is some more chaos in that kind of situation. But I think that's okay. I think that's what the world is kind of moving towards, where you can have an app and things like that, where you enter an area and it notifies you, okay, you have entered this area, these are the laws and things that you can do in this area, these are the things that you can't. And I think that's an okay thing. It's a new way where somebody can be like, okay, for you to enter this jurisdiction, you have to have shown that you are familiar with using this app. And then if you have certain things that you like doing and you make sure like, okay, you note those things, I like doing this, 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 and this, then it will notify you when you go to an area where that's not a thing done. This is already a thing that was common. I've traveled a lot as a kid, and I remember traveling a lot younger. It was like, okay, you had to go into books. You had to find out this information. What are the customs there? Now people can find that information online. You can get to the app and directly and tell you. So I think with laws and things like that, there's going to be better ways to do this. There's going to be better ways to get actual, not arbitration in these things. Because the current system, yes, that money situation is negative, but it's not even just negative with that. It's just the fact that I think 5% of cases actually see the court. If you even had a situation where they say 25% actually have to see a judge, have to see a jury, have to actually get the whole process in there, your day in court and things like that, the system would just crash. It's already so slow. A lot of things are just settled outside. So we can have a better system where you actually get to actually make your case in a better situation. I think that's going to help in the near future. I mean, with this technology and things like that. Okay, back to the reading. In New Hampshire, three Free the Nipple protesters were arrested in 2016 when they went topless on the beach. Activists now want the Supreme Court to step in. Now there's a picture here, an expulsion of Adam and Eve. It's a painting of the Garden of Eden after they became aware of their naked state. It has inspired many artists, including Lucas Cranach the Elder. So maybe Lucas Cranach the Elder, it's like a little preview. Lucas Cranach the Elder is probably going to come up in this article. Okay, Professor Amy Warble is the author of Lost on Trial, a book which delves into the history of American obscenity. She says America's opposition to female nudity is rooted in quote, evangelical Christian opposition to the display of the body that goes back to the arrival of Puritans in New England. They brought with them a very particular reading of the Old Testament story of Adam and Eve. And when Adam and Eve come into the world of knowledge, the first thing they realize about themselves is their nakedness, and they fashion aprons to cover themselves. It's a pivotal moment in which you recognize the shame of nudity, and that has lingered. Unquote. Verbal, is it verbal? It's Werbl. I think it's verbal if it's in English or American English, and then to be verbal if it sounds like a Germanic name or something. Verbal. Okay, it says in this particular theological thinking, in place when says in this particular theological sorry, Verbal says in this particular theological thinking, in place when America's laws were enshrined, argued that it's the female body, quote, which holds the responsibility of the fall of humankind, unquote. Now this I agree with. There is an aspect of this. There is that whole situation where Eve is held responsible for that. There is some underlying dislike. I don't want to say outright misogyny because you have the flip side where it comes where Mary was virginal, and again that could be a mistranslation from young girl, but Mary has a higher position in Catholics, but maybe they had to put her virginal where she's not touched in a sexual sense to be pure. Maybe they take her to like a pre-Eve state, because Eve, of course, was a virgin. They wasn't having intercourse. I don't know, of course. Actually, who's understanding? Because I guess we weren't really reproducing. The animals weren't reproducing. You're kind of in a state of nature in the Garden of Eden. Was there actual sex going on between animals? Were plants actually reproducing in any kind of way? Or was anything dying in that sense? Was there dying? Was there birth before the fall? Or whatever, eating of the fruit from the fruit of knowledge? I guess it depends on whose translation or which headcanon you want to have of the Bible. But I think Mary kind of goes back to that pre-eating of the apple Eve state by being a virgin, and I think that's why that carried on in some sense. But there is this aspect where there is a female body. But most women do understand. Most women understand that their physical body has an effect on men, has an effect on other women as well. That's why they wear the makeup. That's why they wear the outfits. That's why they compare each other. That's why they go back and forth with these things. That's why, unfortunately, some people have psychoses and issues with bulimia and bigorexia and obesity, because they understand there is something in there. Now, how natural is it? I think it's natural. How cultural is it? How much of the nurture has actually changed it into situations that could be negative? That is up for discussion. That does change depending on the culture that you're in, the time that you're in, and things like that. Okay, back to the reading. A search for the hashtag Free the Nipple, generates over 4 million posts on Instagram. Yet Instagram's community guidelines state that nudity, including photos of female nipples, is generally not allowed on the platform, with a few exceptions. Verbal says, quote, so if then someone claims that they have transitioned to being a man, then their nipples are male and that will be allowed. If someone transitions male to female, then the nipples are female and not allowed. Unquote. It's a complex subject, warns Verbal, who says that social media company algorithms cannot understand nuance, such as whether the posted image depicts free speech protected art or illegal pornography. Yeah, that's something that will be improved, and there's an image here, Free the Nipple, and some women are walking around with pasties and different things, and a big banner with Free the Nipple. There's a guy there. I mean, they're excited, they seem to be enjoying themselves. But back to these things, I think there's a difference with male and female, and then man and woman. I don't think, like, male and female, I've talked about this before, where it's like, male and female is biological, it's XXXY. You cannot transition. I'm a male no matter what culture I go to, I'd be considered a male. But what a man and a woman do, depending on the culture that you go to, is behavior. It's normally like the expected behavior you will have of an XX, or the expected behavior you'll have of an XY. Those are the kind of things that you'll say, this is the behavior, this is a culture, these are the actions that person takes. You're not a man. If you're comatose, you're not a man. You're still male. If I was just comatose, knocked out, when I fall asleep, when I'm asleep, I'm still male. I'm not doing anything that's a man. Now, if I was snoring, that might be something that would be considered masculine. Yet if a woman was snoring, that wouldn't be considered feminine because there's certain traits and certain behaviors, and certain appearances, certain physical things that are associated with men versus women. Now, all of us can technically grow beards, but growing a beard is something that's masculine. It's more associated with the male of the human animal, the human ape, than it is the female. Having all your hair kind of shade out depending on the culture you're in, not having armpit hair, having long hair, having your eyebrows did, having your nails did, having your legs removed, hair, having your pubic area also removed. These are things that are cultural, that are associated, that are feminine. Dress, fashion, those are things that are feminine or masculine. Your behavior are the things that are men versus women. Your genetics are things that are male versus female. So that's one thing I kind of have a pet peeve with, how those three things are kind of misconstrued and switched around, and I don't think they're quite the same. Okay, back to the reading. No longer discreet. Catherine Watzel. Now, is this Watzel? Watzel? Is it Catherine Watzel? I don't know. Catherine Watzel, president of the American Association of Nude Recreation. Well, there's all sorts of things. Hey, this is the American Association of Nude Recreation. Give me a job. No. American Association of Nude Recreation says that people are now fighting in courts for their legal right to nudity than before. Saying more people are now fighting in courts for their legal right. I'm just thinking about the American Association of Nude Recreation. They got too much time on their hands. And what's a legal right? You can be naked. There's no legal right to be nudity. No, the government shouldn't be one to give you these rights. There's too many laws. Too many laws. Why are they taking... This is not something you need to beg the government for, man. If you're to a private place, you should be allowed to be nude. Come on now. Back to the reading. Quote, in the past, a lot of these attempts were quieter and discreet, and people wouldn't take it to court, but now it's a different case, she says. Things change. Attitudes change. Remember just 20 years ago, breastfeeding in public was a no-no in many people's eyes. Here's a picture of Catherine G. Wetzel. Says AANR will support people's right to be naked in places where it's legal. Yeah, of course. Anybody. It's legal. It's legal. I'll support it. They'll be naked in a legal place, especially in private. I think in public, I think it's understandable. Just wear some clothes. I don't know. Okay. Watzel says her family's attitude while growing up allowed for at-home nudity, but she understood that wasn't the case for everyone. My mom would do housework sometimes in the nude, and as it was hot and uncomfortable, she said. My husband's background was different. Nobody in his family came out of their bedroom or their bathroom without clothes or a robe on. Crocus remains astounded by what happened to her in Loveland, saying that in some states with legal nudity, people won't bother you, but in states out west, in America's so-called Bible Belt, it's like it's a crime against God if someone sees you topless. This isn't about feminism. This is about equality. I do think Americans are afraid of nudity, especially when it comes to women's bodies, because many have the argument in their head that every little bit of a woman's body is for sex, and that's not the case. Unquote. Does she not use her breasts for sex in a sexual manner? I guess men use their chest for... Yeah, okay, so in that situation, I will agree. Males do have, while having relations, adult content, adult mentality required for this. I'll probably introduce that at the start of the video. Put the shirt up there, the design and things like that, and the sign and the thing. Yeah, because like adult mentality. Yeah. So men do walk around topless in general, in certain places, and they also use their chest in a sexual manner. So yeah, okay. So I do understand that depending on the context, you can say, okay, it's not for sex. And that's the thing. I understand that. But I like this line here. This isn't about feminism. This is about equality. I'm liking that. That might not be completely related to this, but that's a good little takeaway from this. Because people for some time, feminists and other people have been talking about how feminism is about equality. And I'm like, no, it's not about equality. It's about women's empowerment and women taking certain rights. It's not about equality because you don't want to be like the current... There's a draft. World War III is going on. Like women, even with the beginning of feminism, when was feminism actually about equality? It never really was. Because to begin with, the suffragette movement, one of the major things with the suffragette movement, the first wave feminism, when the middle class white women, because they were actually keeping out black women, they didn't want black men to vote at that time because not like every single man was voting. Not even every white man had the ability to vote at that time. There was a lot of people weren't voting for different things. Anyway, coming back to these things, they were told, hey, the men who actually vote, they have to be subject to the draft. Do you want to be subject to the draft? And then they said no. Until that was taken away, then they jumped back on board with that. Certain places, certain states gave women the right to vote because they had a dearth of men. Like Wyoming, I think, was one of the first ones. And there was like 5-to-1 men to women, males to women, males to females. So let me actually be okay on that. Males to females. There was 5-to-1 males to females in that state, and they wanted to attract more females, so they gave women the right to vote. Not girls, but women, because a woman is an adult female who has of an adult female human who has achieved certain levels of cultural understanding and awareness that they're like, okay, you can do this now. We expect you to do this. We think you're able to do these things. So that's the kind of situation where they got in that situation. But this whole idea of feminism about equality, no. And I like how she said this. I don't know if she knows she was saying this. This isn't about feminism. This is about equality. I want to quote this. I'm going to grab this quote, and I think I'm going to keep this somewhere and tell people, look, Miss Crocos here told you. It's about equality. Feminism is about equality. Well, anyway, let me know what you thought about this article. Do you walk around? Have you been to a nudist colony? Have you been to a nude beach? I think it's different. I feel like in Europe, at least from my memory of watching TV in Italy, they seem to be less prude on the whole showing nudity in public on television. That might have been because I was watching strictly cable. I don't know. But I think like nude beaches are it's more like a mixed kind of situation. If you go to the beach in Europe, you can see that. But then also you go to the beach in Europe, you can see women in hijabs depending on where you go and things like that. So there is that clash of cultures and things like that. What do you think about this? What do you think it's going to be like in the future? Do you think this is... I think a lot of this does come from a place of religion. And I have... I have a general... I'm skeptic. I'm mistrustful. Question things that are based off of faith. Because I'm like, okay, what's your backing for this? There's people who can probably make excellent cases for why they shouldn't do this. You shouldn't walk around naked in front of your kid because your kid's going to grow up and become the president of the American Association of Nude Recreation and go out and try to get more people to be naked. Maybe that's the negative effect. Maybe that's the whole thing the Christians are talking about. We're like, oh, it's going to ruin this slippery slope and everyone's going to be walking out naked and we're going to have like the devil coming out. I don't know. I don't know what people want. Anyway, I think one of the videos you should check out is a video I had on the hijab, talking about the different outfits and the different coverage that it has with the actual thing, and is it actually restricting or is it freeing? Is it fashion? What is the kind of situation? What are we talking about when you look at the hijab? I think that would be a cool video if you liked what I was talking about here, kind of related to it. But that's it for now. Like, share, and subscribe. There's merchandise on the screen. Probably some drawings that I was doing with actual people or images from the actual article. Links below to the article. Till next video. Goodbye.